Hello, career competitor. This is Steve Meller, as always, here to share with you some powerful conversation and some significant insights into what it means to optimize your career in pursuit of your optimal self. I am excited to be introducing our guest here shortly. But as always, let me draw your attention to careercompetitor.com, where you'll see right at the top of that homepage is a place where you can enter your email and become a part of my monthly subscription, my mid-monthly message, where I am just simply giving you that little nudge in the middle of the month to remember that whatever it was you set out to achieve with all that energy at the outset of the month and whatever those lofty goals may be at the end of the month, that you're not going to lose sight of that journey in between. Become a part of my community today. Head to careercompetitor.com, enter your email, and look forward to my next mid-monthly message. Now, let's get right into the show. Hey there, and welcome into this episode of Career Competitor with my guest, Helen Hanison. And Helen, as any guest, will get the introduction she certainly deserves here in just one moment. But I'm excited for this one because we're going to be talking about things career. And for anybody listening to a show called Career Competitor, should expect once in a while that we dive into a masterclass, let's say, on establishing the right career for you. And that is what this episode is all about. So 3 things to be listening out for amongst many other things within my discussion with Helen here. Firstly, we're going to get into the motivation that comes from achieving things that give you what you need in life. Secondly, Helen's going to reveal how we can look at utilizing perseverance in a way that best serves what's right for us. And finally, we're going to discuss why the work that goes into establishing a career compass is worth it in the long term. So these 3 things and much more within my discussion with career expert Helen Hanison, and I hope you all enjoy. Okay, our career competitor today is a fellow Brit and fellow coach with a story that makes her the ideal fit for her clients that need to become unstuck within their careers. As an executive coach, our guest specializes in helping seasoned professionals who are stuck at a career crossroads make a plan that aligns what they do with who they are, and then, most importantly, act on it. Furthermore, our guest has a book coming out titled Unstuck, a smart guide to purposeful career redesign, which challenges readers to identify the things in life that are most important to help you act in a way that will reveal career transformation. I'm excited to be welcoming to Career Competitor from sunny Sussex in England, Helen Hanison. Helen, how are we doing?
Yeah, really good. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you, and this has been a long time coming. I've been excited just to have a little bit of British blood back on the podcast. These Americans keep taking up all my time, quite frankly, but hey, here we are, and I'm just excited really to get into something that is really at the heart of this podcast. You know, again, I don't have too many people come on and speak specifically to career transition and, career transformation. But so many of the conversations that we have with our guests are just laced with this, defining moments where people make decisions in their lives to make a shift, to become, in your words, unstuck. So I'd love to just kind of start in what you know best and ask you, where did your passion for this personal transformation that you're providing to your clients, where did all that originate?
I think a lot of the time people who are in coaching or therapeutic support as well, they're really wanting to help their past selves to a certain extent. And that there has to be a healthy balance with that one. But, I experienced career crossroads a good couple of times in my own career. And I think really the amount of time that we spend in our careers, the years, decades, we're going to at least once, actually. So that kind of career crossroads where you really just feel stuck and unhappy about that aware that you need to make change happen, but either not sure what change is needed or very clear, but feeling a bit impotent about how would you get from A to B, is where people get stuck in a loop of solving the same career problem over again on their own. And if I'm very honest, I wish I had a me back at, these couple of points in time to sort of really help me think through, because I got there and redesigned my career and it does feel purposeful, but I also talk about lost years, as I call them now. And that would be what I would absolutely hope I'm saving the people I work with from.
Yeah, these potential ruts, let's say, that we can find ourselves in sometimes, it's difficult to actually, firstly, even recognize that we're in it. Sometimes we can be fortunate and have somebody close enough to us that knows us well and says, hey, you seem to be in a rut right now. But I'm curious if anyone's listened to this and they're like, now that you've said that, Helen, maybe I'm in a rut, maybe I'm not, or maybe I'm on this spiral, maybe I'm not. How might someone just take a moment and be able to check in and say, hey, am I where Helen is sort of explaining I might be right now?
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? We are not always the best person to know ourselves, I think. And that sounds a bit confusing, but what you're saying is exactly the point. I think I would say there's a few criteria that would help someone recognize if they're stuck in a cycle of solving their career problem. And one would be that they've been trying a few things. So they're already aware. It's not a surprise to them that there's something they're trying to correct or improve or refine. And it may not be, I do think it's a bit misguiding, this word transformation. It may not be as clear to them as, I wish I could transform my career. But they've tried situational change. Either a promotion is escaping them, so they move job, or they are increasingly aware they love one element of their work, but they've been promoted away from it, or they're not getting access to it where they are. So they, again, try that kind of situational change. And then what happens X months down the line, usually about 6 or 9 months, they realize that the sort of high of having achieved change, the engagement that comes with grappling with something new and a different cast of characters and getting the approval that you want from that the new leadership around you actually hasn't achieved what you needed it to. So it's like a tug on the sleeve, I often think. It's a whisper in the air that grows a bit louder. What people then become aware of is, oh, I did change. That was logical. However, I seem to have carried the problem with me to some extent. It's sort of the same but different. And there you are again, back at that point where you know you can't, that's not tenable for you long term. So it's quite intangible, which is a shame. But what makes it measurable is, have you sought and achieved career moves that haven't given you what you need? And I think it's really just sitting with that question and sort of thinking about it a slightly different way and being a bit honest. If that's you, if that sounds like you, maybe you're stuck. And maybe you need to therefore do something different to achieve a different result.
Yeah, we both operate in the world of intangibles, working in coaching as we do. And it is funny because when people reach out to you as potential clients, for instance, one thing they would like to see from you sometimes is like, hey, what is the return here? What's my ROI that I'm going to get from coaching? Can you sort of give me this shiny object that I will eventually achieve having come work with you? And sometimes that can be tricky in our space, and you kind of speak into that in terms of just as individuals, our ability to, pursue what it is in our lives that we feel is most important to us, because that is difficult to measure. That is difficult to sometimes even define. And so with that being said, what you're presenting here is just like, what if you were to just simply track periods of time, 6 months, 9 months at a time, and say, having achieved whatever it may have been I achieved, considering where I am now, am I as equally satisfied, equally motivated as I was when I experienced that achievement 6 to 9 months later? Or has all of the emotions maybe that came with that moment, have they just kind of disappeared? And I'm now left with this sort of longing for, maybe more success or getting that next hit of momentum and motivation. It's kind of what I'm hearing you explain here.
And you sort of, I often use the language of, chasing hits of happiness, and that being really the wrong direction to go. Hits of happiness, whether it's career or otherwise, are so transient, they're fleeting. And we do all get propelled along, and careers in particular, because you can sort of usually see the next goalpost in sight once you achieve something you've been challenged with in your career context. However, if when you achieve it, whether it's promotion or a business win or whatever it may be, you feel flat, empty, deflated, and that doesn't lift. I mean, you might feel that for a beat, whoever you are and whatever the goal is. But if it doesn't lift, if the next horizon of something you feel equally enthused to pursue doesn't come into view, that's another really important tell. And I think to your earlier point about, how do you explain to people when they are right on that tipping point about coaching? It's a lot about explaining to people that there is nothing tangible that I can gift them. However, what I can do is explain a general sort of formula that I like to work with for career redesign and give them the hope attached to other people's stories, usually, that actually once you have these pieces in place, usually pieces of self-awareness, it's quite introspective, but it allows probably quite a fresh way of analysing what's going on around you and as you said, how you feel about that. Then things that suddenly felt, used to feel very vague, very ambiguous, do suddenly get a bit more defined, much more defined, and therefore actionable. So that's as far as I would ever go with a promise in our work, because the rest of the coaching results is, of course, how they act on, designs that they've co-created with me in our work in their real world.
Yeah, it's you actually allude to it in the book of this notion of readiness. Like you've written a book that really is for those that are ready. You're not necessarily writing something that's convincing people to stop what they're doing and say, hey, wherever you are in your career, I'm here to challenge you and say that you're in the wrong career. It's nothing like that. It's about, hey, you've already gotten to that point of readiness. Your curiosity is already heightened to the point of where it's like, hey, I know I need some form of a resource right now just to kind of help me figure out what the heck it is I'm feeling right now, why it is I'm feeling this way right now. And that readiness for me, at least from my perspective in coaching, is pretty much the prerequisite that if you don't come into coaching with that, there's really no need for the coaching, and sometimes people are surprised to hear that, but it's true that the readiness is huge. And you're speaking now, not only through what we're having a discussion around, but when we talk about the book itself, I'm curious, like from a readiness standpoint, how are you registering someone's readiness? Let's say when they come to you and they say, Helen, I think I need you in my life right now, but can you maybe help me understand whether or not I truly do? Like, what does readiness look like in your perspective?
So it's really interesting, and it's not ever so linked to what people bring into what I call clarity conversations, where we're both mutually choosing whether we'd be the right fit to work together, because people come in with such compelling and emotive situations that they feel stuck with, and they've got a lot of language and they've often got a lot of feelings that to bring to that. And that's not the point. It's maybe a bit of a clue, but it's not the point. It's really when I say to people, so often I'll ask them to literally score their situational stuckness, so whatever context they've just explained to me they feel deeply unhappy about, and give it a score out of 10. And it makes no sense whatsoever at that point in the conversation, but they don't hesitate too much. They know a number. And then we revisit it at the back end of that conversation. And it's so simple and it's so obvious only then that actually if they could live into the vision, and this doesn't matter if they have a sharpened vision where they know exactly what they're trying to achieve in a purposeful career redesign, or if that's the point of their stuckness, they have no clue. They just know what they're doing now is untenable for every day till retirement. So it doesn't matter, but I ask them to score that, the feeling or the vision, whichever they sort of have within reach. And then you point to the difference. And it's really interesting then, because while it's not my job, I don't ever want to convince people into coaching. I think you're right. Readiness is absolutely key, and that has to come from within them. It is, I think, the job of a good quality coach to sort of be a mirror and reflect back to people what they've just explained to you, so that they can see that for themselves. And I think that gap, that dichotomy between, well, I'm stuck here and I'm this much unhappy, but there are reasons that I'm stuck. Here's the barriers, and, it could be a success trap. I've got obligations, responsibilities, or whatever it may be. I don't know what else to do. I've invested so many years or decades into this now. They see it differently because the cost of staying stuck, has real impact for them. And you're showing them what it could otherwise be. And that's what they need to see.
The cost of being stuck. So much of, and you don't know my story as well as I know yours, mainly because you've not read my book and I've read yours, so I have an advantage over you in that. So the one thing I will be able to say is that so much of your personal story really resonated with me, and it's that notion of, as you just kind of very easily captured for us, is that notion of what is the cost of being stuck. And to have that awareness of saying, not only am I stuck, but there is a cost. There's a cost either to me, to those closest around me, to whatever that vision is, as you explained just now. Like, there is some sort of cost here, and in order for there to be a cost, you have to start by valuing whatever that thing is towards the cost. If you see what I'm saying here, like that notion of, hey, if this is a cost to me, then I have to value me. If this is a cost to my spouse, then I have to value my spouse. Whatever it may be, it's that recognition that there is a value at play as well. I would love for you to emphasize here, because it comes through in abundance in your own story, but also through the book, why it is we need to value the career direction that we go, because to everything that you're speaking about here, it matters. So why should we put such a value on that career purpose and that career direction?
Wow. To me, this is almost the biggest question. I'm glad it comes through in the book. I think the most important thing and the most clear way to explain it to people would be, if we get stuck performing a role in career, but also in life, that no longer has synergy, has lost touch with those things that matter to us most, that's when we get stuck in an everyday way of being that feels completely dissonant. And it might not fall off a cliff and overnight wake up one day and be dissonant. It's never that clear, and there's the danger. What is most important to us, our values, put simply, shifts over time and in response to the things that happen to us, around us. And, that's very hard to keep in touch with, actually, because it's not on the surface. But unless you link that stuff that's quite sort of going on underneath with the outer work that you are, the role that you're performing in your career, then that's a bit of a danger zone. That's a fast track to a career crossroads. And I think that's not easy to do on your own, if I'm really honest. So in the book, I sort of spend quite a bit of time explaining to people a bunch of different ways that they can access this for themselves and really do the thinking, because it's not very fluent for people. But I think, if I put it really simply, we feel so disengaged. I don't know how else to explain the dissonance. It's become so clear. One client explained it to me that she felt, I'll never forget this, and her story is in the books, but she felt hollow. She felt like she was moving through some kind of horror movie. She felt like a sort of shell of herself, and that the real horror was that she was completely sucked dry of all the things that made her her, and nobody could tell from the outside, because there she was, still able to perform, get through the day. But that was, I think, probably one of the best explanations of dissonance that I've ever sort of been a part of. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, because, again, the hollowness, I think, when you start using those words that capture emptiness, I think that's a very powerful visual for anybody listening to this, is this notion of, hey, when you look at your workday right now, when you're sat at your desk and it's 9 a.m. and you're about to get going with the workday and you're looking at the list of things to do, what is that list doing for you right now? Is it filling you up? Is it getting you motivated? Is it getting you excited? Or do you look at it all and just feel, to your point, hollow? Do you feel empty? Do you feel as though, hey, this stuff, I could just kind of knock it out in my sleep. I don't even really need to give it my all, if really any ounce of myself whatsoever. That disconnect there is huge, right?
I think actually that's the beginning of huge. When you realize, as you say, you open the calendar on a Sunday and you feel flattened, or that sort of a heaviness, there's sort of beginnings of oppression. That's the first tell. What happens is that grows. It gets worse and worse and bigger and more enveloping, until actually you are living your problem and you're looking through, you're clock watching all day, every day, and you have that sort of stomach sinking feeling of dread as you walk in the building, and you only feel very temporary relief as you leave. And that's whether you're closing the laptop because you work remote, or sort of, you go to a bricks and mortar place of work. Is not enough of actual living in between that way of working. And I think that feels really clear to me, that we are a bit too excellent at persevering through that kind of feeling. We think it's our job. It's a bit of a social constructed instruction there, but we do think that it's our job to persevere and be resilient through that level of unhappiness, because that's professional, or that's responsible, and that's our obligation, that's our expectation, or someone else's of us. And there's another really important kind of stuckness, that we can somehow carry on despite it coming at that kind of cost to us on the inside.
Yeah, it's I can't help but see the relevance of two British people talking about what I feel as though is almost the results of the Industrial Revolution. It's just like that. That's what to this day, we're still in many ways experiencing it. It's in our DNA, this notion of just like clocking in, clocking out, and just, hey, we've got to show up, we've got to do our job, we've got to stay on the line, however you want to put it. And if you've come from maybe generation after generation of people earning a paycheck like that, why would you think any different? Why would you? And it takes someone who's maybe been on that sort of conveyor belt type of career to suddenly make a very brave decision just to say, hey, enough of the conveyor belt, enough of this feeling of just kind of going through the motions and checking the boxes or whatever it is. There are so many people that listen to this show that have wonderful careers, that are so motivated and are filled with purpose. But for every one of those, I know if you're listening to this right now and I just described you, I can guarantee you can think of 2 or 3 people really quickly that complain about their careers to you. So for every one of folks like you and I, Helen, who feel very purposeful in what we do, there's at least 2 or 3 others that are struggling, that do feel that hollowness towards what it is they're doing, and they're persevering. And I'm so glad that you brought up this, because it is such a really interesting idea that you present through the book, is this notion of perseverance. So I'd love for you just to kind of give us a little bit more about that, and why, in your words, that perseverance is this dark power that's holding you stuck. I mean, those are some powerful words for a word that people will sometimes say, hey, you should have perseverance, but you're kind of pushing back a little bit on that notion. So I'd love for you to go into more detail on that.
Yeah, sure. It's a bit of a sort of passion point for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's, how do I explain why? I think we're back to this idea of it being a social instruction. And these things that I call social instructions are so embedded in the culture. And I don't think it's special to the UK, although I do get what you mean. I think there's a lot of my clients are stateside and Australia and elsewhere in Europe. And it's, it does seem to be a bit of a global pandemic of thinking we must, don't have permission to do otherwise than persevere. And there's a lot of language out there increasingly over the years about resilience. And I think that's the same. There's a dark side to resilience, perseverance, because resilience is really the tools that we use to buffer ourselves on a path that perhaps our younger selves put us on. We feel trapped within, we're not happy, but we discount the piece that's about us. And we prioritize the piece that's about that sort of social prescription to carry on regardless. And that's the bit I feel very, very, very strongly about. It's really important to question where these truisms, where these social prescriptions, where these ideas come from. And carrying on regardless of being unhappy is absolutely as big as it gets to me. It's as pivotal as I can possibly come up with for why someone would be stuck in their careers. So I do think it's really important to do the work that presses pause on all those sort of what feels sort of so automatic, such commonly understood ideas about carrying on anyway, that you actually stop and analyze and hesitate and consider, but what is that giving me? What is that costing me? What if I didn't? What would that look like, and what difference would that make? What would it take to make change happen so I didn't feel this way? And really that I'm describing a process of giving yourself permission to make change happen, and prioritize yourself within your situation, within your context, whatever that is. And if you're anywhere near thinking about this, you already know that actually you're not happy enough. You're coping, but why is coping, even admirably, okay? It's quite a low threshold for what you want from life, really.
Yeah, and what I love about it, whether it's perseverance or resilience, what you're saying here is that these attributes aren't things that we should disregard. What you're saying is that we should be using them the way that they're meant to be used toward ourselves, towards our personal mission, our personal goals, as opposed to the satisfaction of maybe someone else. And that is easily the hole that we can all stumble into in a variety of roles within our lives. But this seems like a great opportunity, though, for you to share maybe a little bit of your own personal story with how you were able to have that awareness yourself. Like, what was that moment where the rubber met the road, as they say, and you just said, hey, this is time. It's time for me to start using this perseverance, if you will, towards what I want, as opposed to maybe this idea that somebody else has maybe painted for me.
Yeah. Well, there's a few, but I think the one that comes to mind is sort of leaving, I suppose it's the exit point for my career one, which was a 20-year tour of global public relations firms. And I was that person who'd already decided, well, I'll make change happen. I had become a new mum. I didn't want to be a board director anymore because I could see the amount of travel and, it wasn't very possible to be part-time and on the board. So it was, there were lots of things, and this will sound maybe slightly unfamiliar to people actually who are in the working climate as we are today, that remote working was, you could negotiate it, but it was agreed through gritted teeth, was never honoured, never respected, and called not being committed enough. So I really had tried a bunch of things. I left one firm and went to a smaller one. I deliberately went to a lower role. I was very open, almost to the point where I thought, they probably won't want me because I'm going to say this. And then they did. So I went to a smaller firm and sort of was very happy for them to benefit, obviously, from all the experience, but that was the role I wanted. Wasn't aspiring to go back onto a board. That was the point. I wanted this less demanding role because I needed balance with my career and my mothering. And that seemed to be working reasonably until my boss at the time said to me, we went out for one of these coffee meetings, which was always a bit of a bit of an alarm bell, isn't it? You're invited off site for some important conversation. You're not quite sure what the agenda is. And, long story short, she said to me, we've bought you mind, body and soul at this level. That's what we've bought. That's what we want. Wow. And it was, and I sort of write this in the book, it was one of those moments, if I could be the editor of a movie instead of writing a book, it would have had those wobbly lines where you're sort of transported to a different place and it's all dark around you and there's a spotlight just and time freezes. It was one of the very few times I've experienced that, and I really did. And I just heard myself almost saying, wow, the problem is I've sold 3 days a week for which you do get my mind and body, but my soul is elsewhere. And, the other days of the week are mine. So I don't see this as a fit. And it was shocking, but true. And that became the tipping point for me that was absolutely undeniable, completely violating my values. Not that I had access to this language at the time, but I really understood this was not tenable. I tried, that was my best effort. And if that was how it had translated, it had beaten me. Yeah. So I left and went through it began a very long period. And that's where I call my lost years of hurtling at different things in a very deliberate effort to find another fit. But it was all a bit scattergun because I didn't yet understand what I now do about what it takes to align career transformation with these important factors, these really important variables, because otherwise it's just change, situational change, one after another, and it's a bit more like throwing mud at the wall, which is definitely what it felt like.
I'm sure, but you represent now what I think is so important in folks that do work like yours, is that you are an example, a walking, talking, shining example of, if you work this process, if you respect this process, you can get to this point. And it's not like every single person you're going to coach is going to turn into an executive coach that helps people with their career transitions. But you're going to be you are doing, for people, and have been now for some time, what you were able to do for yourself, which is always going to be the hardest part. It's always going to be harder to do it for yourself. Not that I'm sure you got plenty of help in the process, but I can resonate with that entire story of, here I am as an executive coach myself. We work with different clientele, but my clientele work with me because of my experiences of operating in high-stake environments. That's what they connect with me on, because that's what they're experiencing, the same way that have no doubt that your people are all resonating with you and connecting with you in that through the coaching that you're providing. One final thing I'd love to just touch on is everything that you just alluded to there within that story came with a ton of work, a ton of hard work, which is where it actually now allows us to really understand what you were alluding to earlier with perseverance and resilience, because here you are now moving and shifting those very characteristics into a space of fulfillment and purpose. So just tell people a little bit, maybe if they were to be thinking about doing this very step, making this very switch, this very change in their life, from a mindset standpoint, from a hard work standpoint, what is somebody really taking on? I know that's a bit of a vague question, but at the same time, I'd love for you to see if you can maybe just capture, like, when you think about the folks that you coach, what does work really look like?
Yeah, it's a really important question, actually. And I think the word transformation is a little bit misguided for people. I think people at that tipping point are feeling very motivated / desperate to achieve change. And the idea of transformation makes it feel like there's some kind of magic bullet, magic formula, magic wand that just makes it happen quickly. And you're right, it's not like that. I honestly believe anyone who's selling transformative and transformation and implying it is not a good idea to sort of go that route. I personally believe transformation happens one small step at a time. So the work, certainly the formula that I've created, is first of all to build what I call a career compass. And that has a few different components, 3 or 4. And that's quite introspective, actually. So some of it's reasonably sort of easy to access. We talk about strength. Then we've alluded a little bit already about values and the difference, but you are looking for overlap and synergy between those things. And I think once you've packaged all that up with a sense of a sort of broader purpose for you in your career and life, then there's some direction setting, crystal clear clarity for any career design to be purposeful. And unless you can have that kind of clarity about what any kind of change would need to align with, I don't think it can be transformational. It's just situational. So that's the first. Now that sounds like quite a lot, but that's only the first point of the work. Then we move into what I call career redesign, which is all much more practical and pragmatic. A lot of ideation, sort of I have fun using lots of language that come from my career one, and sort of teach people who might not have that familiarity with brainstorming and really being quite creative with their thinking, but then translating it to something very useful and practical. So that's the next stage. And then we get into the mindset mastery. And there's a lot of mental fitness stuff. I'm a narrative therapist as well as a coach. And a lot of that comes in then, because I think even the best designed and most cleverly aligned career redesign plans aren't actually enough. We then need to anticipate those things that will hold us stuck, that are perhaps inner barriers as much as practical and pragmatic ones, and figure out how we would navigate them as and when and if they do show up so that they can't. So that's the sort of third and final sort of truth about transformation that I talk about in the book, and is what it takes to achieve that kind of aligned career transformation, for sure.
Two words come to mind as you're explaining all of that. One is personalized, and second is fun. The word fun just kind of jumped to my mind. Again, honestly, because again, it's work is work, and people hear a word like that and they're like, how can that possibly be associated with fun? But you can hear, because of the personalization approach and the fulfillment that comes with anything that's personalized, there's going to come fun with it too. There's going to be fun in the process of doing that kind of work. And so that came through in abundance as you're explaining it. And this is a great opportunity for you to just share with everybody, firstly, how we can access the book, what we need to know about it, and secondly, how we can maybe even access you in that process as well, Helen.
Yeah, great. I love hearing that the fun element comes across. It is completely bespoke, and that's sort of the point of this kind of work that's all about congruence. So the book is going to be on Amazon. It will also be in other bookstores. So you're looking for Unstuck. That's the title of the book. There is also, there's all kinds of QR codes. I've popped one in every single chapter, and there's sort of special gifts for people who are buying the book, because I do feel very passionately, being a coach, that anything that is read or otherwise learnt also needs to be actionable to have value. So there's lots of frameworks and exercises or links to online resources to make doing the work and applying what you're learning to yourself and your own situation, even as you're reading. And there's a note as well about the online companion course, which you have no obligation to enter into. But if you are feeling that you're wanting a bit more bespoke, a bit more access to me, but also perhaps a cohort of others going through the same thing, then that link's in there as well. Purposeful Career Redesign is the course. And of course, you will find me on helenhanison.com. And I'm very happy, always love to see emails drop in and sort of get messages from people who want to find out a little bit more, and we can organize a conversation around that.
Wonderful. And the book is it out now? Is it coming out soon? Was it out now?
It's coming out soon. Yes. Not quite yet.
Not quite yet. So I'm hoping that maybe by the time that we actually release this in a few weeks, the book may be out, and I'll obviously update everybody based on what's going on with that closer to the time that we release the episode. But Helen, listen, this is such powerful content. All of this stuff can really either help somebody who is in that position where they know they are clearly stuck and they need to start being the catalyst for overcoming some of that situation, But at the same time, I know this is going to be really useful to those that are actually well on their way, and when they are in a position where they can be that lifeline maybe to somebody else, this is the kind of insight that's going to really help them in those moments to maybe help someone see what they're unable to see themselves. So I just appreciate your generosity of insight. Appreciate your time. Always so glad to have a fellow Brit on the podcast. And just best of luck with the book. Best of luck with everything moving forwards.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely to talk to you.
And my thanks again to Helen for joining us on this career-heavy episode of Career Competitor. As I said in the introduction, from time to time, it's so important that for anybody listening and tuning into this show regularly, you get hit with a dose of what it means to make sure that you are on the right career path. I am all about investing in who you are and optimizing the performance within whatever world you're operating within. But from time to time, it's important to check in and ask these powerful questions that Helen is alluding to within this discussion. Are you in a place where you are thriving, or are you actually a little stuck in the work that you're doing right now? If you're feeling that way, Helen has just ironed out a couple of great ways where you can start. Most noticeably, you can go grab a copy of the book Unstuck, and that will give you a heap load of stuff that you can be utilizing to get unstuck. But at this time, I encourage you just to focus on what motivates you at this time, where you're maybe feeling in this moment, and giving that vision of yours for where you want your career to go a little bit of consideration, and just asking, is that gap healthy right now? Is it something that I feel I'm always bridging, I'm always closing? Or does that gap feel bigger than ever before? Because if it is the latter, it's okay. There's work to be done, but it's okay to realize that. You just have to start working toward what it means to become unstuck in order to pursue that career fulfillment that Helen and I were talking about in great detail here on this episode. So hopefully you enjoyed some of this and it's given you a nice pep in your step about either the career that you're in or the career that you could be in. And I encourage you all to grab a copy of Unstuck as well. But in the meantime, folks, the episodes of Career Competitor continue to come fast, they continue to come impactfully, and they continue to challenge wherever you are in your career and encourage you to keep competing on behalf of your optimal self in order to achieve optimal performance. But before you go, if you're still listening, make sure you give the show a rating. It's super simple. If you're listening to me on Apple Podcasts, just stop what you're doing right now. Click on this very episode that you're listening to. Click on Career Competitor, and it will take you to the page right at the top. You just click the star. You see it right there already. We've got a bunch of 5-star ratings. You can just add to those ratings right here, right now. I would greatly appreciate it. It goes so far to continuing to expand the message that is Career Competitor and bringing in more and more listenership to the show. So I'd appreciate you taking the time to do that. Be sure to subscribe as well in the process. And in the meantime, as always, best of luck with anything and everything that you've got going on within your world. And I look forward to doing this again with you very soon. Bye for now.